I love the cameras on the iPhone. It's the camera that I always have with me, and I shoot a ton of photos when I'm traveling. And with how good these are getting, I'll also use my phone to shoot bits of B-roll for videos here on the channel. And while the stock camera app is okay, there are some other apps that I use that are a lot better at certain things. These are my top camera apps for the iPhone. What's up guys, Jack here, I'm at Tech Videos. It's been a bit of a while since I last talked about camera apps, and since then I found some pretty fantastic new apps that I like to shoot with, and I think you guys are going to really like them too. Whether you want something that is just easy to use for a quick filtered shot, or a more pro app for getting the most out of your iPhone cameras. And by the way, all of these have a lifetime purchase option, or they are just free to use. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that Apple's done a great job at making a built-in camera app that is easy to use, that anyone can pick up and shoot with. It's great for grabbing a quick shot in the moment, and I do love the way that it captures live photos you can replay later. It has lots of built-in modes for both stills and videos. You can turn on the grid and use the level to better frame your shots, which is great. But if I'm trying to shoot something for here on the channel, I want it to look professional. I want the white balance set properly for accurate colors. I don't want a high shutter speed that's going to make the video look all choppy. And I want to make sure that things are properly in focus. Well, there's no way to set the white balance in the native app, or set the shutter speed or ISO, and it only has tap to focus, which just doesn't always cut it. So instead, I'll shoot with a couple of different apps that unlock these more pro controls, and we'll get to those later on. Then other times I just want a quick and easy way to shoot with a filtered look or a color grade that I can share right away without having to edit it. The stock camera does have a few built-in filters, but they are pretty basic. You can't really tweak them, and there haven't been any new ones since these were first added. Well, this first app that I want to show you is a great one if you love to shoot with a more stylized look in camera. This is Mood Camera. It is very easy to use. The interface is clean and simple. There's a few toggles up top for things like flash, changing the aspect ratio and timer settings. Down on the right, there's an exposure compensation dial if you like your photos to look brighter or darker. Then here on the left, this is where you can choose your look. Mood Camera has 14 different film emulations to choose from. And the best thing is these get applied to your photos automatically as you're shooting, so you can spend more time taking photos and less time editing them later. They're just ready to share right out of camera. And yes, you can have it save a clean, unedited version of the photo as well. Each one gives your photos a different retro aesthetic, adding things like chromatic aberration, bloom, film grain, little imperfections, giving your photos more of a retro vibe. It actually uses a Pro Raw image as a base to work with if you've got an iPhone 12 Pro or newer. And it uses a custom image processing pipeline to recreate the classic look and feel of film, while also removing that over-sharpening that you often get with iPhone photos. Chrome, Cine, Portrait and Noir are some of my favourites that I've been using, and these are some of the more subtle looks that I prefer. You can actually tweak the look of each emulation as well. You can adjust the quality to change the grain amount, as well as the tone to change how strong the look is. And shooting with it kind of feels like the X100VI. This is a little compact camera that is best known for its built-in film simulations. But this thing is like out of stock everywhere. It is impossible to get hold of. So this app lets you kind of get that same effect on your iPhone. This is a stills only app. There is no video mode. And there is also no live preview when you have an emulation selected. Like a true film camera, the developer wanted to bring back a sense of surprise and delight when you go back to review your photos later, like seeing your photos for the first time after getting your film developed. But once you've had like a play around with the app and you've got a feel for each of the looks, you'll work out quickly which ones you like most. There is even a randomizer if you want to experiment with a few different looks, changing the emulation every time you take a photo. And if you're someone who likes shooting with mobile lenses, there is a settings toggle that you can use to stop the cameras from auto switching, like will often happen with the stock camera app. Overall, Mood Camera is a fantastic little app that lets you focus on the photography and forget about the editing. Next up, this is Halide, and yeah, this is still one of my favorite apps to shoot with. This is another stills only app, but this time with more of a focus on manual controls. with a really slick interface. You can change the shutter speed by swiping up and down and change the ISO by going left and right. It's really easy to use one-handed. You can turn on a histogram to monitor your exposure or colors with either this big one at the bottom of the viewfinder or this mini one that lives up in the corner out of the way that I particularly like. If you don't know how to read these, then fear not. The app does also have zebras, which are a lot easier to understand, marking areas that are either too light or too dark in the viewfinder with these diagonal lines. It also gives you full control of focus. You can rack back and forth with the dial, use the loop as a magnifying glass at the center of the screen to really make sure that things are nice and sharp. Or my favorite, you can turn on focus peaking, which highlights the focal plane with these green lines. If I am shooting with a third-party macro lens like this from SANDMARC, these have a super shallow depth of field, so these focus tools are a must. You can really nail your focus on those tricky shots. Another cool feature is depth mode. Yes, Halide has its very own portrait mode. Once you enable it with this little cube icon, you'll start seeing this really cool effect that they call depth peaking, which is, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of Batman's sonar vision. You can tap the portrait button to turn on the live background blur, and if you tap the depth map icon, you can see what the camera is seeing as it tries to calculate the depth in the scene. You can also project these photos into a 3D space with AR and then move around them in a whole new way. It's pretty wild. Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. Any photos captured with depth in Halide are also fully compatible with Apple's own portrait editing tools in the stock Photos app. So you can adjust the blur effect, remove it, or use any of the lighting effects. It's pretty neat. Really great interface overall. It adds a lot of controls while still being intuitive and easy to use. There is still no way to dial in an exact white balance, which I'm surprised they haven't added yet. But then again, I have found the included presets to work pretty fine in most situations. Oh, and one more thing, over in settings, under technical readout, you can have a look at all of the specs and stats of your iPhone cameras. Pretty cool if you're a bit of a spec geek like me. I'll take a peek in here each time I get a new iPhone to see what's changed. This next one is kind of like Mood Camera, but this time for video, and it's called Kino. And this is actually made by the same developers as Halide. When you tap on this button, you get access to a bunch of different color grades and looks, some made from some top creators here on YouTube that you might recognize. You can see how each grade looks in the preview and turn on instant grade to apply that look straight to the video file. Or you can leave it off if you want some flexibility later to choose a different look entirely. I love that it gives you both options. You can even import your own LUTs if you have one already that you like to shoot with, and also apply them to clips that have been shot in other apps. For recording, it gives you a lot of format options. You can set your resolution and frame rate and independently choose the color space and codec. That means you can shoot in Apple Log, but in HEVC, which is a much more efficient codec than the ProRes format that you have to use in the native camera app. Great for recording internally when you don't have a lot of space. And if you are shooting with an external SSD, Kino automatically detects that for you. Oh, and by the way, using Apple Log gives you access to a few extra color grades. So if you don't see all the same ones as me, make sure you've got Apple Log selected. You can see and monitor your audio levels with these bars in the corner. But the best thing about Kino is how easy it makes it to shoot smooth, professional looking video. It has manual mode where you can choose a shutter speed and ISO if you know already how to set these. But if you don't know really what you're doing, then auto mode basically just does it for you. In auto, Kino will try and expose your video to a 180-degree shutter angle, basically trying to keep your shutter speed at double your frame rate, giving you much smoother and cinematic looking video that doesn't look like the choppy phone footage that we're used to seeing. As long as it's lit up green, you'll know that you're good to go. If you're shooting outdoors and it's really bright, you can stick on a variable ND filter and then adjust it until you see the auto button turn green. This makes it a great app for anyone wanting to shoot smoother, better looking video on their phone while still keeping it really easy to use. It is by far the easiest video app to use in this list. The UI isn't bloated, it's quite similar to Halide actually. There are a few more options under this menu where you can turn on a waveform, toggle stabilization, or the grid. And you can set the white balance. It has a few presets, or you can dial it in exactly as you want it. I also really like this red outline you get so you know when you're recording. And just a tip, if you drag the record button down when you start, it will lock on in case you accidentally press it again. You have to drag it back up to the center to prevent any accidental touches. It is a really powerful app, but still simple enough that anyone can shoot with it, and that's why it makes my list. It is well worth checking out, and it's my go-to if I want to shoot with a specific look. All right, next up, let's take a look at Final Cut Camera from Apple. Yes, they finally did it. They came out with their own answer to a video camera app with pro controls. It actually feels very familiar to the native camera. Currently, it is a video-only app. There is no way to shoot stills, but hopefully that is something that they can add in a future update. That way it can completely replace the default camera app for those that want it to. Tapping this arrow reveals a few extra buttons. Here we have a slider for precisely setting the white balance. We can switch from auto exposure to manual, giving us controls for shutter speed and ISO, as well as a slider here for manual focus. Under this settings icon, there's a tools menu with toggles for showing the overexposure indicator in red and focus peaking in green to make sure that the subject is nice and sharp. And you can select an input device under the audio tab. Now, this app was actually made as a companion app to the Final Cut Pro app for iPad. And I've not had a chance to properly try this out yet, but this looks pretty cool. You can link multiple iPhones to the iPad to shoot and record a multicam sequence straight to a project. Even control each of the iPhones remotely and then sync all the footage back to the iPad for editing, cutting between each angle. I only have one iPhone at the moment, but I do really want to try this out in future. But this totally works as just a standalone camera app for your iPhone. You don't need the iPad to shoot with it. I will say Apple's done a really great job of it. If you are coming from the native camera app, then this is definitely one of the easiest to get used to. It's a really easy transition over. But there are three things that are missing. Up top, you can change the video recording settings, but there is no way to record in Apple Log without also recording in Apple ProRes, which it takes up so much space. So I'm really hoping that they add more codec options in an update. I'd also like to see LUT support to better see how Apple Log looks when it's converted to Rec 709. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to work with this sort of flat, washed out preview. Then also, and I know this is a bit of like a niche one, but there is no option for de-squeezing anamorphic footage shot with third-party lenses. These lenses use cylindrical glass to squeeze a wider image onto the camera sensor, which when de-squeezed, give you that nice wide cinematic look with those cool lens flares that they're known for. But yeah, I can't see this being that high on the list of things to add, but I would love to see it. This last app solves all of these. This is Blackmagic Camera, and it is by far the most feature-packed video recording app that you can currently get on the iPhone. Unlike Final Cut Camera, you can independently set your color space in codec. That means you can shoot in Apple Log with its flat, unsharpened profile and shoot in HEVC at the same time to give you even more recording time. It supports LUTs so you can accurately see how Apple Log looks in Rec 709, and it supports anamorphic lenses with options for de-squeezing both 1.33 and 1.55 anamorphic footage, both in the live preview and on the saved video files. Which is a great one for me. I love the cinematic feel you get from these lenses. They can really transform your iPhone footage. Then the rest of the app is just packed with toggles and controls. Now, I will say that this one does have a bit more of a learning curve when you first start using it. It's definitely not as user-friendly or as easy to use as some of the others we've looked at. But if you're confident with shooting video with manual controls, then it's got everything you'd need and more. We've got FPS, shutter speed, ISO and white balance controls along the top, along with lots of video assist features like overexposure indicators. We've got different frame guides, including safe zones and guides for different aspect ratios if you're cropping your video in post, a manual focus slider, as well as the ability to create keyframes at different focal points. So you can have the app perform a pull focus for you between up to 3 points. So you can always hit your marks. It has settings for different levels of video stabilization a built-in slate if you're working on a more advanced production with lots of scenes, and lots more options and toggles in the settings menus. It's the most feature-rich of all of the apps in this list. It's the app that I shoot with when I'm recording bits of B-roll or product footage that I think I might need in a run-up to a review. And in some behind-the-scenes videos, we've even seen Apple use the Blackmagic app when they've been recording some of their recent keynotes on the iPhone. So it gets the Apple seal of approval. The developers have also been amazing at just like adding new features, like things like the focus pulling. And they just dropped the 2.0 version, which not only added iPad support for all of you budding iPad videographers out there, but it also allows you to use an iPad or a second iPhone as a remote monitor and a controller, which is pretty sick. You can use it to remote control multiple iPhones and then sync all of that camera footage together, similar to what you can do with Final Cut. It's kind of unbelievable that this app is completely free to download and use. It is by far the best video app on the iPhone right now. But it does take some getting used to the UI and all the controls, so you might want to start with Final Cut Camera if you are totally new to pro video apps. So those are all of my favourite camera apps for the iPhone. They each have their own strengths and weaknesses or different use cases. Sometimes I'll use an app just because I want to take a quick shot with a particular look and vibe. And other times I want to have complete control and dial in all the camera settings. Let me know in the comments if there are any other camera apps that you think I should check out. I will link to all of the apps I mentioned down in the description if you want to check them out. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe and hit the bell to see more tech videos from me, and I'll see you in the next one.